Trying to describe Conrad's credentials and background is an amazing effort, including things about the Curiosity Mars rover and how much she led that program and just all kinds of things, and then her work as an Episcopal priest. But I want her to jump into what she wants to say here, but what a treat it is to have her with us. So let me turn it over to Pam.
Thanks, Mark. First of all, thank you for having me today. I love this place, and of course I love Mark, so I couldn't say no. I want to talk to you today about one of my favorite topics, which is community and connection. And I started thinking about community and connection when I got this crazy notion that I should stop being a film producer about people doing science and start doing the science. There was only one problem, and that is I majored in music in college, and no one wanted to invite me to be their graduate student in mineral physics. And I couldn't understand why, because I thought, well, isn't everything related to everything else? And I was sort of tongue-in-cheek about it at that time. But as I began to take the studies to prove that I could get into graduate school and then take the tests and finally get in to do science, I started studying about how all the things that exist that are made of chemicals vibrate. And because they vibrate in a particular way, when they're next to some other chemical element, how they move changes. They vibrate differently. And because they're vibrating differently, they start relating to other chemicals differently. So you see how this can run out of control here. There's only a set number of chemical elements that exist, and that's everywhere in the universe. And they're all vibrating. And I thought, it's kind of like when I pluck the window string. My parents had these double-hung windows in one of the rooms of their home, and they were a pretty high pitch. So I could actually put my fingers on the window string and play little songs on the window. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. It's just like a violin or a guitar or this or that. And I realized that, wait a minute, there is a lot in common with what I learned in music school and what I was beginning to learn in science school as I began to use the tools that identify what a material is by how it vibrates. And I thought, I'm home. I have found the magic connection between this one part of me that I love and this other part of me that I love. And that set me on a path for trying to discover more and more connections. Because I love St. Francis, the man of the moon, the sun, the stars, everything being his friends, his brothers, his sisters, it got me thinking about how we regard each other in church. So I want to talk about systems and relationships and how that might pertain to church. There are a lot of connections we could make, and if you were at the service, you heard me kind of keep repeating the community, 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 because I wanted to tie together what we just said as we reflected on the pastoral letter of James with what we were going to talk about here. And that is how there are systems inside of systems, and so hearkening back to that discovery about how everything vibrates in a characteristic way, and how when it gets next to something else, it starts vibrating differently. It made me think about how the different systems in which we all live affect the other systems that we also inhabit. So, I want to talk about systems a little bit in a little more specific way. as I said when I was starting this today, this characteristic of everything to move, I think, is a key indicator that everything resides in God. And I like to think of the universe, or multiverse if we prefer that astrophysics model. I think the source of all this movement is the specific innervation of God. And God makes us move with God's own divine energy. My own suspicion is that that divine energy is love. And I think of this as the most marvelous opportunity, because with everything moving and how everything moves changing as it comes closer to something else that's also moving, it means there are an uncountable numbers of legions of possibilities for how we could be in relationship. From the tiniest pieces of an atom of a particular material that might comprise our body, to the various things that we encounter in our daily lives and in our faith walk. So, let's consider a system. System is some stuff in relationship, and taken together, that stuff forms something new, something novel. We call that the emergent property of a system. You can take some hydrogen gas, you can take some oxygen gas, but they don't look like water and they don't act like water. They're just a gas. But if you get those atoms together, you get another miracle, water. And that water has different properties in the conditions in which we all live. So, systems are a collection of things that have a completely new identity as a system because they're all together. So, what are some examples of systems that you can think of? Yeah. Healthcare systems, yes. Is it really the healthcare system, or is it the healthcare reimbursement system you're thinking of? Just giving you grief. A family is a system. A congregation, a church community is a system, yes. A school. Family. Yes. The human body, yes, that is a great example of a system. Take a cell here, a cell there, it does not a person make. What about an economy? Solar system, yes. Ah, what an awesome contribution. What about a prison? Talk about an oppressive system. What were you going to say? Government is a system. So you all have lots of things that you can use as models for systems. So the problem is, when a system is not healthy, it's possible that the emergent property of that system is also not healthy. So, what I'd like to do today is try to think about how we can be intentional as we navigate the different systems in which we are a part, and think about how our presence in the system changes or contributes or subtracts from the system, and how the system impacts us as an individual. The reason why I think this is so important now is because our God, at least according to the Holy Scriptures, is always doing a new thing. See, I am always doing a new, no, it's not always. See, I am doing a new thing. Mortal, do you not perceive it? Sometimes I feel like that's God speaking to me personally. Come on, don't you get it? Move. So, when a new person joins a community, or a person exits a community, the community completely changes. You might not recognize it at first, but you will recognize it later. And so it is possible that we could be intentional about our approach to systems. This is called systems thinking. And I have been studying the work of a researcher in Finland named Raimo Hämäläinen, and a team of a couple of people. He has a big lab, and he's been studying something called systems intelligence. And I'm just going to read how he describes it because I don't want to mess this up. Systems intelligence is our ability to behave intelligently, and I'm going to substitute in, it's not quite the same thing, but I think it works, not just intelligently, but intentionally with purpose. Systems intelligence is our ability to behave intelligently or intentionally in the context of complex systems involving interactions and dynamics and feedback. We can perceive ourselves as part of a whole, noticing the influence of the whole upon us, as well as our own influence upon the whole. And he has developed a schema, a way of thinking with systems intelligence. He says there are 8 dimensions of systems intelligence. First of all, perception of the systems, and that's our ability to see what the systems are. As I said, we all live in multiple systems. Then attunement. What is the capability that we do or don't have to feel and tune into where the system is at? Here's a great example of that in church. One of the most stunning experiences is when a group is saying something in unison or singing something in unison, and everything is so together, it's as one body. It doesn't sound like one voice, but it is that together. I attended a church once as a visit when I was on vacation, and I was sitting behind a man who was racing through the Lord's Prayer, and it was out of sync with everybody else. And the music part of me was like, slow down, because it destroyed the living dimension of the community, because he was his own entity waiting to get through the prayer quickly. When you hear your choir chant the psalm, it's amazing, right? Because they have practiced listening to one another, and they're in such community with each other. They speak with that emergent property of a system, the glory of the music and the chant. So that's attunement. Reflection is our capacity to reflect on our thoughts and think about our thinking. To think about our thinking. So what they mean by to think about our thinking is to question how we think, why we think, what we think. Is that a reflection of something that is in tune with the system? What is our thinking adding to the system? If I bring discord into a system, is that going to help, or is it going to not help? Positive engagement, and that is the character of how we communicate. Now here's the thing, a communication is kind of a relationship, right? And the problem is we have lived in a culture where we have truncated the number of characters or words we use to communicate something. We think it will be faster and more efficient. The flip side of that is it may be more cryptic because we lose the context of it. So how we communicate actually makes a big difference on the functioning of the whole system. We want to have good, transparent, and clear communication in a system. Spirited discovery. That's a really hard one when it comes to church. How many people have heard this in response to a new idea? Well, traditionally, we have always done it that other way. Case closed. That sometimes is important because tradition is important to us. It's one of the legs of that stool, the scripture. So, the thing about communication and spirited discovery working together, if we are open to new ideas and we can communicate an openness to them, to people who are putting the ideas forth, you get a brainstorming mashup which can feel really good. It's like a good session of improvisational jazz where everyone is trying a new riff, and when it's their turn to go with it, the others follow. Effective responsiveness to spirited discovery. This one is taking timely and appropriate action after we've been excited about the new idea. In other words, we can take the thought, but when we implement it, that's a form of motion, right? We have gone in a direction that changes where we are in the system, and the system is now going to come back to us. The seventh dimension of systems intelligence is wise action, our ability to behave with understanding and a long time horizon. Essentially, it's saying, look to the future. How far out can you place that horizon and try to understand the potential effects of any action that you take or any words that you might utter? The farther out into the time horizon you can look, the better you can orient your own self to the big picture. So I would also maintain that time is a system. And as we tell ourselves, live in the present moment, we can't let go of the concept that there will be a time further out and we'll be navigating that at some point. So we keep an eye on that, but we don't spend all our time planning for the future, or else we disappear from this dimension of the time system. We also get the situation where we don't like where we are at the moment, and so we think a lot about the way it used to be. That's also a big one in churches. I remember a time when the pews were so full, people could not get in the door. I've heard that one a lot in a lot of different churches. That was then, and this is now. We have to live in the moment we're in so that we can see what comprises the system, who is in the system, what further out into the time horizon there might be as an opportunity for us, because we will change and we will grow within the system. The eighth dimension is a positive attitude. This is sometimes hard because systems have some people who are positive. I was going to say some are positive and some are negative. And some just aren't sure. And what that means is that you can get an overall sense of the ethos of a system depending upon who you have talked to in that system. And if you don't talk to all the components in a church system, you'll never know whether it was just that one person or two people, or whether that is a sense of the whole system. And so you begin to act accordingly. Oh, things are awful. We are a church that is doomed for this or that or the other reason. Systems intelligence is looking at these 8 dimensions. I'm going to name them again. Systems perception, ability to see the systems. Attunement, getting a sense of it and being in tune with it. reflecting on the system, positive engagement, that's communications, spirited discovery, which is passionate engagement with new ideas. Notice he didn't say to just hear the new ideas. He says passionate engagement. No idea will blossom into a reality unless it has some passion behind it, because passion's sort of like that juice that gets you over that activation barrier to make it real. Effective responsiveness, wise action, and a positive attitude. We have traditionally, in the church and other psychosocial systems, talked a lot about the family system. And a lot of the way we approach things like leadership and management come from studying families. And systems are so much bigger than just families. So this approach of thinking about all the systems in which we reside is very important, because we're making a very narrow perception of what the possibilities and the challenges are of a system when we only think family. Because a family system has a specific set of power dynamics and conditions that may not apply universally to a larger array of systems. And so I have jumped into this fully because I think it may be a powerful tool for navigating the changes that the church is starting to undergo, having come out of the pandemic. We are different than we were before that. We are feeling our mortality. We are looking at the statistics and seeing the rise of this group called the religiously unaffiliated, or what is in common parlance termed the nuns, not N-U-N, but N-O-N-E-S. And so we have this opportunity now to think broadly, bigger, and with more hope, if we can implement some systems thinking. I have spent 25 years or so exploring the entire planet, going to extreme environments to try to understand what makes life able to operate in conditions where I wouldn't be able to. And what I have seen time and again is the resiliency of life. To be resilient, you must be diverse. So in systems with ideas, it means you need diverse ideas. In systems that regard people, you must have a diversity of contributions of people. The systems that are the most diverse have the greatest resiliency to big threats. What are some of the things that you might see as a big threat to the stability of the church system? The response was some of the people in it. Yeah, but you can't have a church system without the people, so. Yes. Operating costs, money. Modern culture. What do you mean by that? Okay, so the sources that communicate modern culture. TV and internet and the like, he says. Yes. The decline of the number of children that are baptized. What else do you think? Bad press. Does that mean we need better spin doctors?
No, but I think what we think a lot about is the, crazy Christian right, and it gives us all of that name.
He said, sometimes what you read about is the crazy Christian right, and it gives us all a bad name. What about the crazy Christian left? We don't read about that. So I think one thing that's really important is We're old. Not everybody. But when I think about the median age of people that are churchgoers, it skews a lot older. What were you going to say? So what she said was properties, and largely aging properties at that require a lot of maintenance. It's very expensive to maintain them. I would say that goes into the earlier comment about operating costs. We live in what is laughingly called a free market economy. There is no such thing as a free market. There are specific forces that drive the market in the direction of a particular set of profit milestones. And so while we can say the market influences economy, you have to take that with a grain of hard truth. What were you going to say? Say it again. Oh, that's a great one. The rise in selfishness. And in fact, I would take that a step further and say, yes, that and or self-centeredness. We are less community-centric than we used to be. What were you going to say? Yeah, yeah. Ooh. Okay, so I'm going to separate those two so I can repeat this for posterity on YouTube. So I'll go in reverse order. So scarcity of children as a reason to come to church. A lot of people are having children later or having fewer children, and many of the reasons why people come to church, and correct me if I'm not summarizing this exactly right, come to church to provide some kind of moral foundation and ethical teaching for their children. Does that capture that one? What was the first one again? Yeah, time scarcity. Let's talk about scarcity. Scarcity is a real physiological response to environmental stress. So we can't talk about that scarcity mentality without talking about what the stressors are. But there is scientific evidence that when there are environmental stressors, for example, extreme weather events, high inflation, so less spending power, but also things like inability to buy food because you have less spending power. If you are not advantaged financially, it is very difficult to get quality nutrition. And so without having quality nutrition, you act differently, your relationships are different. And so all of those things kind of work together. The scarcity mentality that affects a church is often a sense of retracting the amount of mission work we do within our communities. This is not true of every church, of course. But what happens is people are so focused on, I must have enough money to pay a priest full time. I must have enough money to refurbish our organ this year because something needs fixing on it. Those kinds of things are very difficult for a vestry and a budget committee trying to figure out What do we do this year to be the best possible stewards for the resources that we have? And of course, going back to the scripture of the day, which was some texts from the pastoral epistle of James, we learn a lot about where to put our focus in order to live in community successfully. So I do think that's a part of addressing scarcity mentality. But you're right, scarcity mentality, I think, is coming from a larger cultural message than just from the church. So what do we do about all of this? What might we do to use systems intelligence the same way that we would use emotional intelligence to navigate relationships, or our intellectual intelligence to generate new ideas? How might systems thinking, systems intelligence, help us to be more robust churches? Try different things. Like what?
Seems like there's a lot of churches, so if you had a bunch of ideas, it seems like you could implement certain ones in certain churches and see what sticks.
So what she said was, there are a lot of Episcopal churches, and so there must be a lot of ideas out there, and we could try some here and see what sticks. We could try some in some other church and see what sticks. The challenge, of course, is just putting that out there. What else might we try using systems thinking? Oh, that's a great one. She said, assess what we do well. Thanks for that.
But I have a thought about these two items. If you don't practice doing something new, you'll never get good at it.
Why do you think those two things are incompatible?
Well, I don't think they're incompatible. I think they're connected. Is that trying new things and do what we do well. There's always a first time you try something. And you're probably not good at it when you try it first. So I think if we really believe in system intelligence, we should have faith that we can try new things and get good at it.
What she said was that we can try new things if we have faith that we will ultimately get good at them if we try them. Or not. I've tried some new things that I regret. But we're talking about church here. Yes? Yes. And so you're pulling directly from the verbiage of those 8 dimensions of systems intelligence. And I think that this is really key, what you just said. You haven't played miniature golf for a gazillion years because you associated it with when your children were little. And you did it, and it was fun. And there are a lot of things we can try. They're going to be fun, or they're going to be not very fun. And so we know, maybe shelve that latter one for another time. When we bring the joy and that positive engagement with a new idea, it is exciting. When we bring the, oh no, that'll never work, it's really hard for other people to overcome that inertia of the, oh, that'll never work person and go to the, maybe so. Were you going to say something? So that's really interesting. In case you did not hear that, I want to repeat it for the recording. And that is that your final comment, which is people are almost afraid to say they go to a church, but if you engage with somebody else who has maybe been using the explanation for why they don't come, that they're too busy, we have too many things going on. We all have the same number of hours in the day, yes? And it is a choice how we divide them up. I have made the choice recently that I'm not going to do any more work for the 2 Mars missions that I'm connected with. And that's intentional because I want to focus everything I have on the church and its emergence post-pandemic into something new. I want to know what God is going to do with the church. And I hope you all are as excited about that as I am. But I am choosing to use my time that way instead of checking sequences to send to a rover 354 million miles away. And it's the same thing with people who are focusing heavily on making money. We always think we don't have enough of it in case if this happens, or in case that happens, or what if inflation when I turn 87 and I'm all of a sudden without. We can't spend our moments working on the future. We can donate some of our moments to the future, but if we want to build the future, we start with where we are now. The future is never a thing that we enter into. The future is a thing that we build. And so if you want to have a say in what it's going to be, you've got to engage it in the now. And so I think I recall that I was supposed to stop at 11:40. Is that correct? 3 minutes. Spew. Go ahead. What a great sentiment. To embrace change or to do something new, you have to be willing to fail. And sometimes the church, a lot of times the church doesn't want to have failure. There is a woman named Catherine Schultz who wrote a book called Being Wrong. And the central thesis of that book is that being wrong is very important. Because if you're never wrong, you don't try anything new. And so I believe that just as God has built us to adapt to changes of conditions, which is the best thing I think that God, well, not the best, but one of the coolest things God has given us, the ability to try things differently when they don't work out is an amazing opportunity to do something right. So don't be afraid to be wrong. Thank you for that contribution. How many seconds do we have, Mark?
2 minutes.
I think we've just been granted an extra minute.
I feel the passion, and I think passion is a huge thing. So if you're passionate about your church, you're out in the community spreading it, it really has the ripple effect, and you are planting the seeds. So I feel like the more people that are passionate about it, spreading the word, creating the ripple effect, inviting people here, doing community events with them, making them feel, like you said, the love. I've been thinking about that a lot this last week. I don't know what exactly planted the seed, but I was just thinking if I did everything with love first, the way I was with my kids, the way that things are not going right at work, but if I answer and respond with love, I think that creates a huge impact, which will eventually create that ripple effect to see how we are living in the light of God.
What a wonderful comment. Planting seeds is what we do. And so when we plant seeds with enthusiasm and just keep going, you don't know what's going to happen and you may never find out, but you have to have confidence that the seeds have at least been scattered and some of them will take root.
Yeah, I think also as a church focusing on the message,
Yeah. Jesus was awesome. That was a completely game-changing message to just go out and love the snot out of everyone. It works. Yes, so what he was saying is, we don't have to even explicitly say, come to church. We just let it be known that we are going to church, and that plants a seed. You're nicer than me. I'm much more shameless, and I bribe people, and I say, let's go to brunch, but I have to do these 2 services at church, so come with me, and then we'll go out to brunch. Yes. It was how I caught that. My former master controller for broadcast knows where we are. I would say that the way we would know what is a healthy system, go back and read the epistle readings, the texts for today from the pastoral letter of James. He pretty much describes it. It's peaceful, loving interaction, doesn't have envy, conflicts. The end.